I was able to fill myself with remorse, empathy, and sympathy for you. Now, don't twist it because I still hate your guts and wish you the rest of your life in prison. Also, don't be expecting forgiveness out of me. You might be able to convince other people, but you won't get it from me. You ruined a lot, but don't go raising your ego because you thought you ruined my entire life. You've only ruined things in it. You got away with it, or you've also improved my life. You got me away from you and Ashley. You brutally taught me how not to be so naive. You got the rest of my family away from you and Ashley and into a safer place. But most importantly, you found a way to wind yourself in prison.
You just heard a small portion of the survivor's mic drop as she stands up to her former cockroach stepfather. Now he's facing life in prison. The defense is asking for 20. This is his sentencing hearing. Let's see what Judge Boyd does, but I think Judge Boyd will do what Judge Boyd does best. We'll unpack it with the details at the end. With that, let's jump in.
All right, court is calling 2022 CR 7283, State of Texas versus Christopher Brent Davis. I have parties announced for the record for the state. For the defense.
For Mr. Davis.
Suzanne Kramer, also for Mr. Davis.
All right, Mr. Davis, you entered a plea on May 7th of no contest. The court found there was sufficient evidence to find you guilty. The court deferred finding of guilt. You're coming open to the court. Have both parties had a chance to review the report from probation?
Yes, Judge.
Yes, Judge.
Any objections, state?
No, Your Honor.
Defense?
I have a couple of corrections, Judge.
Yes.
Regarding his discharge from the Navy, it was stated in there that it was less than honorable. I think his actual discharge was a general under, what's it called? Under honorable.
Okay.
General under honorable, not less than.
Okay.
And at the very end where he states a few things he wanted you to know, he refers to something that happened to him at age 5, but a subsequent conversation with his mother that was determined to have happened when he was at age 2.
Okay. All right, any witnesses?
Not from the state, Your Honor. We just have an argument.
Just Mr. Davis, Judge.
All right, could you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do have a couple other witnesses. Can we take them first, Judge?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
All right, call your
Let's
first
call
witness.
Edith Davis.
All right, Edith Davis.
Stand on yours.
All right, can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you're gonna need to keep your voice up so the court reporter can hear. Could you state your name for the record?
Edith Davis.
All right, defense.
All right. And Ms. Davis, are you Christopher's mother?
I am.
All right. And I think you may have heard me state just a minute ago about something that happened to Chris that you said happened at age 2.
Yes, sir.
And can you explain to the judge what happened and how that turned out?
So our babysitter was leaving. We were looking for a new sitter. My husband's getting ready to go to Korea. We found a lady that was in the neighborhood. She had 2 other children that were a little bit older. I had come early one day and found their children throwing rocks down on my children. Christopher was almost 3, not quite. Then when I got found out she was giving them dog treats for cookies for their snack. And I had known that both my kids, Kristen was disabled, but Christopher, very active, had gotten very, very afraid of when I was cleaning house. I didn't understand why, but when I had talked to my daughter, she told me that the kids would take the vacuum cleaner and suck on Christopher with it and tell him that he was going to suck him up and he would suffer. So when I saw what was going on at the house, I immediately removed him from the house. I found my next door neighbor was gonna take care of them for me, so. It took a little while to get him a little bit more calmed down, but. It was pretty traumatic for them.
And did you have a statement that you wanted to read for the judge?
I do. That's okay.
All right. State, do you have any objection to the reading of the statement or would y'all?
Statement.
Well, I mean,
I know.
it's technically it's a narrative, but if you all want her to read from it or counsel, if you want me to read it,
I have no objections.
all right, you may proceed. That's okay. If it would, if you want to, I can actually read it.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, you're welcome. No problem. Just give me a moment. Thank you. All right, any further questions?
Do you have anything else you'd like to tell the judge? Okay, nothing from Ms. Davis.
All right, thank you.
I'm going
Okay.
to call Michael Davis.
All right, Michael Davis. Does anybody have any Kleenex?
Get one, Judge.
Okay, thank you. All right, can you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
Michael Davis.
All right, defense.
All right, Michael, are you Christopher's father?
Yes, sir.
We've had some conversation about this scenario and it's my understanding that you feel like maybe you could have done something different than would have avoided all this. Can you explain to the judge what you're feeling?
Yes, ADHD runs in our family. I was never diagnosed, but I've had issues with it my entire life. I'd learned to deal with it. When Christopher finished high school, he quit taking his medication. And if I had, when he joined the Navy, if I'd called the reservist office and told them that he was ADHD, because I know he didn't tell them, they would either rejected him or kept it, had him take his medication. His whole life would have been different. One phone call, if I'd made it, wouldn't be here. So, love my son. I know he did wrong, but that's all I've got, ma'am. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate you coming in to testify.
I don't have anything further, Judge.
Any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you so much.
And Judge, at this point, I just have Mr. Davis.
All right, so raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
Christopher Brent Davis.
All right, defense.
All right, Christopher, what is it that, other than what you already stated in the PSI, what is it that you would like the judge to know before she decides what your sentence ought to be?
Your Honor, there is no explanation, there's no rhyme or reason, nothing would be able to be justified as far as what my actions did. There's every day that I live with regret because it's not only one person I hurt several people, including my own children, my own biological children. The only thing I can ask is for forgiveness from them, and I will accept whatever consequence that you see as punishable, Your Honor.
All right.
And Judge, this is the part where I do, like I tell my wife, if I tell you something from here on out and that you can accept it two ways, one to make you mad and one to make you not mad, I mean the one that makes you not mad. So, question that we have is what's appropriate punishment for this type of case for
All right,
Mr. Davis?
I'm sorry, just 1 second. State, you don't have any questions, do you?
No.
All right.
All right.
All right, thank you for giving your testimony. And
So-
so the range of punishment for this offense is 5 to 99 years or life.
That's correct, Judge.
So, state, what are you requesting?
Do you want my request and my argument or just my request? Right?
Your request.
You're asking for life, Your Honor.
All right. So they're asking for life. Defense, what are you going to be asking for?
Judge, we're asking for 20.
All right. So now, state, I understand why you're asking for life. Defense, I understand why you're asking for 20. So, one, I'm not going to sentence him to life. I've taken in consideration his testimony. I've taken in consideration the testimony from both his parents. And I want the parents to know, at some point in time in life, your actions are not the cause of your child's actions. Because how old are you?
38.
All right, so he's 38. At some point in our lives, when we're making our decisions, no matter what happened in our past that was horrible for us, or maybe our parents made a mistake in how they raised us, at some point, your actions are your own. All right, so I'm not going to sentence you to life, but I'm not sentencing him to 20. It's an egregious offense.
And if I may offer some perspective on that, Judge, that's what I
Yes.
intend to do. So we agree it's egregious offense. He agrees it's an egregious offense. It's something that went on for about 6 or 8 months from what we can tell from stipulated evidence. And yet, the same day that we were pending, that we actually entered our plea, there was another person pending who's had a death of a child, injuries to a child causing death. And the very next day, this same prosecutor's office, same prosecutor,
I'm going to object to this line
offered
of.
them 18 years.
All right, okay, so here's the thing. Defense attorneys, you all know that sometimes people can be at the Bear County Jail or at the prison. Sometimes there are people at the prison for murder, they get 5 years. Somebody else at the prison for murder, they get 30 years. Every case is different, and there's a reason why people are given certain times. And there are reasons why sometimes this court follows a plea, sometimes that I do not follow the plea. Now, what I'm telling everybody, the state has asked for life. State can ask for whatever they want. I've already told the state, I'm not giving him life. So the argument about what they did in other cases, that's not an appropriate argument. We're here for this. Now, if somebody wants to make an argument that the same fact scenarios, as we would call it in law school, that the case is on all fours, if there's another case that's on all fours with this case, where the state gave somebody 12 years or 10 years, then we need some explanation, because maybe things are not being done fairly. So if you can present a case to the court that's on all fours with this case where the state made an offer of something less than life, I think it's relevant. I'll hear it, because maybe something else is happening in the office.
Well, Judge, and I would offer you something on that. I think it's on all fours. I don't know whether it's on all fingers and toes, but there was a case in the 227th where the fellow was charged with continuous sex abuse of a child, same as Mr. Davis. He was allowed to plead to aggravated sexual assault of a child, same as Mr. Davis, but he was given 12 years.
All right, so
For a 4-year-old child.
So let me ask you this. Was that a case where you had a defendant who's alleged to have pretended to be a juvenile online and then tricked his stepdaughter into allowing him to engage in sexual activities with her by pretending if she didn't, the new friend that the defendant had created, life would be in danger?
Of course, Judge, I cannot offer you that, but they just, for selective prosecution purposes and sentencing purposes, substantial similarity, I think, is what they look for. And in this case, the same charge, same reduction, a 4-year-old instead of a 14-year-old, and this fellow gets 12 years and the state wants life. I know you said you're not giving that to them, but this guy gets 12 years in a different court, and Mr. Davis is looking at whatever that you choose to give him. So
Okay.
that's the only reason I'm offering that, Judge.
Right.
And again, back to I'm not trying to make you mad. I
No,
don't want to visit my sins on my client.
No. Here's the thing. One, I don't get mad. I believe that everybody should be allowed their argument. I've been a defense attorney before. People should be allowed their argument. I've been a prosecutor before. People should be allowed their argument. I don't get mad. And what I can tell everybody, when you're in jury trial, if this were a jury trial, guess what? Defense counsel's state's closing arguments, that's not evidence. Evidence is the steps that I have. Evidence is whatever testimony I receive. Closing arguments that counsel do on both sides, that's spin. And hopefully the arguments they're making is in some form or fashion connected to the case that was just heard. All right, is there anything else?
No, Judge, I would just like to highlight, there is one other statement from Christopher in the pre-investigation report at the very last page. It states that he was the subject of a grooming himself when he was around 12 years old by a 39-year-old. We've discussed this, and again, Judge, he's not of the opinion that it's any excuse for what happened, and he doesn't even really know if it went any any substance or predisposition for him to have done this, but it's just offered for the court for contextual purposes.
All right. So I want to let you know that I heard all of the arguments. I internalized everything. And these are very difficult cases. Anytime someone comes open to the court, it's very difficult. And let me just tell you why it's difficult. This is the type of case where everybody will say automatically it's a life case, right? But I go on facts, I go on what I read, I go on everything. I go upon, experience I've had in dealing with specific cases. Because otherwise, if every case were a life case, then guess what? We don't even need to have a punishment hearing. It's just, this is what you did. We prove it, you get life automatically. So I look at everything. What you've done, of course, is something very bad. And people are going to be impacted for years to come, right? So sometimes when I consider what to send somebody to, I think about their age, I think about protecting of the public. And there are many things that I have to consider. Like, for example, is somebody going to allow you to be around children again? That's something I have to consider. Like, what age will you be where people will see you and they will not say, oh, that's a good catch. Let him babysit a child. Those are all things that I have to consider because part of my job is protecting the public. And I also have to consider evidence that's presented. I consider the stipulations that you stipulated to. So this is what the court is going to do. Court is finding you guilty. There's to be no contact with the complainant. There's to be no contact with any minor. There's to be Chapter 62 registration. Court is going to sentence you to 45 years. Court will give you credit for any time served. Did you review the document entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal with your attorney? Did you understand it and did you sign it? All right, because this is a plea bargain agreement, because I followed your plea bargain agreement, and because you waived your right to appeal, you do not have the court's permission to appeal. Because this is a felony conviction, you're not allowed to own or possess any weapons or ammunition. If you have a question over what a weapon or ammunition is, you'll need to speak to an attorney. Do you understand?
Sure.
All right, we can go off the record. Here's the thing I want to let you know, just a second. I want to let you know that I appreciate the fact that you entered a plea to this, you entered a plea to it early, that when you came before the court, you didn't try to be wishy-washy on whether you did it or not. You are a person who truly took full responsibility for what you did. And I appreciate that you did that. All right, so can you mute us, please? Person here for victim impact?
Here.
And I'm going to stop your video.
No, go unmute yourself, sweetie.
Judge, we heard from this witness at the date of the plea because they had flown them in from out of
Yes, but
state.
this is the victim impact. This is different.
All right, you may proceed. Excuse me.
Proceed
Yes.
with what?
Yes, you can put the camera for him.
Yeah, no, but you can talk, sweetie.
All right, you may proceed.
Do I start reading?
Yes.
Okay. Even after all you've done, even all after all of the activities you did, and all the messed up things you did to our quote unquote family, I was able to fill myself with remorse, empathy, and sympathy for you. Now, don't twist it because I still hate your guts and wish you the rest of your life in prison. Also, don't be expecting forgiveness out of me. You might be able to convince other people, but you won't get it from me. You ruined a lot, but don't go raising your ego because you thought you ruined my entire life. You've only ruined things in it. You got away with it, or you've also improved my life. You got me away from you and Ashley. You brutally taught me how not to be so naive. You got the rest of my family away from you and Ashley and into a safer place. But most importantly, you found a way to wind yourself in prison. Here's a small list of all the things you've done to me, starting with the bad. You've made me relapse many times, gave me PTSD. You gave me a sleeping problem, suicidal thoughts, plus 4 different attempts, depression, anxiety, paranoia and trust issues, problems with talking about my feelings, nightmares constantly, fear of using any bathroom, gender questioning, panic attacks, caffeine addiction, slight smoking addictions, not being able to make friends easy due to trust issues, and problems with family members. Here's the list of good things you've done in my life. You put me into a position where I was being put with people who actually care for me enough to take Wyatt and I as their own children. That's it.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else? All right, Ms. Davis?
Yes, Judge.
All right, you may proceed.
So I'm not sure where to start or the things to say to you, but this is where I'm going to start. Almost 16 years ago, when we got married, you said you would never hurt me or my daughter, who was only a couple months old at the time, or any kids in the future that we would have together. And I believed you. As our marriage went on, you ended up breaking that promise. You made me believe that I was crazy, and to the point to where I had to see doctors, therapists, and I didn't have friends anymore. I tried to help you be a better person, and it made you mad. I had no real warning about who you were. I'm glad I finally realized it with the help of some friends that I did make, and I made it out 7 years later. I made it out before things got so much worse than what they already were. Separated, divorced, went to court for our kids. You made people believe that I was doing things to our kids, and I wasn't. You played mental games with me and would verbally abuse me as well. After everything that you put me through, all the tears and the 7 years, you had everybody still believing that I was doing all of this. But eventually, you were caught because you did it. Sorry. I've been angry, yelled, screamed, cried over everything, and I blame myself for it, for not being able to protect our kids. You're not half the person I thought you were. But after all these years, I realize that your actions say more about your character than they do about me. I hope that life gives you everything that you deserve and you live peacefully with your choices that you've made, because our children and I won't be losing sleep over you anymore. You are where you belong. I feel you not only need for me to apologize for things that you did to me, but to the rest of my family and to these kids. And I hope that you pray hard for that and that one day they can forgive you. But I also want to sit here and say thank you in a roundabout way, Chris, for everything that you've put me through, but because you've not only made me a stronger woman, but you've made me a stronger mother when it comes to protection of our kids. The kids have decided that they wanted to say something to you. Our daughter states that, to me, you were never really my father, only because you treated me like I was nothing, for always lying and never listening when I told you the truth, for robbing me of my childhood and making me have to grow up too
I'm gonna
quickly.
object to this.
All right, excuse me. I'm so sorry. The defense has raised an objection. I'm going to sustain that objection. Thank you so
Okay.
much for coming in to give your statements.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. All right,
Cockroach. Another cockroach, and we're going to unpack this. There's very limited information, but we're going to, go over what just happened, and we'll relish on the life that he's going to have for the next 45 years, but also when he's eligible for parole. For those of you who aren't familiar, this channel covers exclusively parole hearings, but I really wanted to touch on this case, this monster, this roach, and see if maybe I can pull in some new viewers who otherwise aren't getting the YouTube algorithm thing about that this channel exists, that we cover parole hearings here. The first thing that I do want to touch on is the roach's attorney, which frankly, as far as I'm concerned, is also, I get it. Attorneys have to defend the worst of the worst. But can you explain to me where his fiduciary responsibility steps in as an attorney to actually, at the beginning, when his victim is going to speak, says, we already heard her talk. We heard her talk back when they took the plea deal. I mean, he's going out of his way to stop her from speaking at sentencing, which is completely procedural. It's part of the process, as the ADA stated. And then he comes in again. Well, actually, he insults the process by fanning himself with his files, clear disdain on his face. And then when the mother speaks, as soon as the moment that when she's bringing up their biological children, as it went out of the bounds of what was allowed, he, of course, objects again, and Judge Boyd had no choice but to sustain. In my opinion, that attorney and his client deserve each other. And then what we see so often in these parole hearings is that supporters come up and they talk, and there has to be some type of science to it, or some type of explanation, because we see it over and over and over and over. It's a pattern that repeats itself with the parole hearings, when the supporters come up and their heads are in the cloud and they start just these random ramblings. Her 38-year-old son, she goes back when he's a child, brings up her husband going to Korea, of course, and says, we had to get a babysitter. And I found out that the babysitter was giving him cookies. And then I was cleaning my house one day and I realized that he didn't like when I cleaned. And that's when I found out that when he was at the neighbor's house, they would put a vacuum on him and pretend to eat him up. And that trauma turned my son into a cockroach. Are you freaking kidding me, lady? Are you also just a complete sociopath? I get also mothers being in denial about their children, but what was that? Then the father, not any better. He goes back to the Navy days. Oh, he had ADD. He stopped taking the pills, and then he became a cockroach. You know, these are the people that he's now going to be taking his prison phone calls with and convincing himself that he's didn't do anything wrong. If only he had listened. And give Judge Boyd credit, man. I mean, she's like even spoke to maybe she didn't hear what they were saying. I don't know. She was looking at, what are you saying? But it's not your responsibility, parents. Wow. So what did he do? Again, we don't have a lot of details, but my understanding about what he did, and keep in mind, when he married her, she was just, I think, a few months or a few years old. So it's as close as you can get to being a biological father. We're accustomed to seeing roaches target their prey by finding women with children in their desired age range. We see that all the time. This case is quite unique in the sense that he may have been, he found a woman that you can clearly see from her statement who he was able to isolate, who was able to control, manipulate, make her think she's crazy. The classic roadmap, the classic blueprint of an abuser, but one with, it seemed, the ultimate goal was her child. And what makes this case extraordinarily, the idea that I think why he even got 45 years, because we're so accustomed to seeing these things, they get 5 years. And Judge Boyd touched on this, and his attorney was saying, well, if someone did it to a 4-year-old and got 12, then why would a 14-year-old get 45? And Judge Boyd comes like, well, why didn't you find a case that's on all fours? Oh, man, I love Judge Boyd. And she's, find a case where you have a father set up a fake social profile. With that profile, become best friends with your daughter, your stepdaughter, and then manipulate her by saying that something bad is going to happen to him unless she fulfills your sexual fantasies. Find me that case, and then we can discuss it. Oh, man, you're not going to find it. And it's I think everyone looking at this, and there's a data trail, and there's the forensic evidence and all of that they would have had for trial. And instead of going to trial, he took the plea deal. Now what Judge Boyd also had mentioned, which I don't know, which was how she said, well, I appreciate that you went and took the plea and moved with it quickly. But the records that I show, and thank you, Richard, for sharing these records. And also shout out to Mandalorian Melissa for sending me this hearing. If any of you see hearings that you think are like this one specifically stands out, it's an ultra roach. We have, which we haven't touched on yet, mic drops by the survivors, right? I like what she said. She confronted him. She said it how it was. She was tough. And man, I salute her for standing up there and reading out her statement with a lot of strength. And I wishing her, hopefully this can be the building point now that he's locked away. Think about his everyday life. He's just going to sit in this little tiny box, this little prison cell. And, in a section of the prison with all these other fellow roaches, and he's going to do the same thing every day, going to get bossed around. He's going to age in there. If he serves all 45 years, which I certainly hope he does, he's going to be 83 when he gets out. So, but back to what we were saying, I mean, the process was discovery was on 1/6/2022, and then you go through the whole thing. There's a warrant, then the pre-indictment, the warrant issued, the no contact order, and it goes on through the list. And it's along I guess this is just, things move slowly, but they have a waiting trial date set. So he was initially going to trial, which is a normal process that people do in these things. They try to see what deals they can get. They try to kick the ball down the road, see what might go their way. And it just kept getting kicked down the road. And I don't know whose fault it was. But look, there's a plea deadline all the way on 6/22/2023. He takes it to the plea deadline. I'm assuming he pleads not guilty because, again, it says waiting for trial. Plea deadline. And I don't know what happened in between. I guess Judge Boyd obviously knows more about this case and understands this more, but I don't understand how this didn't seem like a quick process to me. This is, what do I know? It's not clear to me yet when his parole eligibility will be, but as soon as I have that information, I'll put it in the comment section or in the description, because we'll keep a lookout for that. Not that we can gain access to the parole hearings, but I think it's important to understand, because we are so accustomed to seeing long sentences being dished out. For example, in Utah, we see where folks get life sentences for doing things to children, life. But then they get paroled a year into their sentence. And a lot of what we found out is it's a gimmick. It's a joke. And the constituency of those states are the ones that are being played for fools, because we just read, wow, legislation allows life sentences. Utah's laying down the hammer, but the inmates are just getting released a year later. So that's really where you find out how severe a sentence is. There's a lot of games that district attorneys play to say, yep, we locked them up for 45 years. And a lot of times the victims don't understand, well, that person might have parole eligibility after 2 or after 5. And now they have to show up to parole hearings every few years. And it's not justice. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. And with that, I'll let you go.